Welcome to the Consulting Leaders Podcast, where we talk about the business of consulting. Whether you're looking to grow your practice or learn from the stories of leaders in consulting, you're in the right place. I'm your host, Guillaume Jouvencel, ex-PwC and co-founder of GHA Marketing. Join me as I interview the best consultants in their niche. Let's get on with the show. And my microphone was muted. That's a perfect start for a podcast episode. Debbie, welcome to Consulting Leaders. And it's a pleasure to have you. So you've done it all. Tech, startup, now training, leadership roles. What got you to focus specifically on developing young professionals?
Well, I actually was thinking about this, and I had a gig at Box when they were a startup. And one of the things I was doing, aside from wearing many hats, helping out the COO at the time, was doing training on process management and project management. And really, he wanted me to focus on process management because we were in that crazy, typical startup mode with a lack of process in a lot of places. And I enjoyed working with those young, just out of college professionals so much that I eventually circled back to it and said, as much as I love being a project management person and focusing on process improvement and those types of things as a project leader, I really decided that my value add would be training the next generation. And part of it is because they just were so receptive. And I just got personal joy out of working with smart, kick-ass people who are, trying to get ahead.
I like kick-ass people. You can get some pretty kick-ass people in leadership positions as well, like more senior maybe. What made you want to focus on the younger professionals?
Yeah, I've worked with seniors professionals as well. I've done facilitation for executive staffs. But the young professionals, I would say, is mostly because they, like I said, they just seem to be very receptive if this is something that matters to them, of course. But it's the receptivity and the fact that there are people who I worked with 10, 15 years ago, and I keep in touch with them, and they're now executives, and if I chat with them, they still talk about the impact I had on them. And it's really selfish because I just get satisfaction out of it, but because I also feel like I made an impact on, the business and the business bottom line by helping the employees be more productive.
Like that. So tell us a bit more about, and I guess you just alluded to it, right? But tell us a bit more about the problem that you're solving right now. What is it that you help young professionals and companies with?
I think of it as helping them build skills. The skills around what I call stakeholder management. It's a very common project management term, but it applies to anything. Like whether you're a middle manager, whether you're an individual contributor, if you're trying to get something done, you need to think about the people around you, what they think about the work you're doing and how they might influence your work and how you might influence them. And that leads into communication. And not that I'm a communication expert whatsoever, but if you really have a handle on the people around you, the senior leaders, all the way down to individual contributors. I used to work in manufacturing too, and I think about the factory floor. In fact, my very first training gig, by the way, was training old guys to use a mouse. So, there's stakeholders teaching them to use a mouse on the factory floor was a whole different problem than, working with young professionals doing project management. But that's where it is.
I like that. So you help them do better stakeholder management. You help them integrate better within their role and what they're doing, deliver better so that the bottom line of the company is bigger. That's very simplistic, I feel. But is that understanding correct?
I think so. We're basically developing their leadership skills without actually calling it a leadership skills class. And sometimes I've thought maybe we should be doing that. but it's really about developing leadership skills and professional skills in the workplace, whether you're destined to become a VP of a Fortune 500 or whether you're destined to continue to be an individual contributor. Just being really effective at what you do and thinking about the big picture is the core of what we get at in our workshops with young professionals.
That would make sense. And I like the idea of developing leadership at a younger age. From experience, we put a lot of people, especially in consulting practices, in management positions because they were excellent, operators. They were doing a fantastic.
Yes.
They get promoted to managers because this is what you do in consulting. You're up or out, but you don't necessarily get promoted with the right skills in terms of managing people and leading people. So that's actually a pain point and a need in the market that is interesting solving.
Absolutely. When I was in tech, like that is a classic problem in tech where they promote individual contributor engineers to be managers and they're not equipped. And that's been some of my audience as a consultant and as a trainer.
From your experience, who's the person making the decision though? Because I cannot imagine that the young professionals are the ones saying, yeah, we're going to spend, I don't know, X figures in hiring Debbie. So you're helping someone who is not the final decision maker. So how does that go for you? Like, how do you navigate that?
It's challenging sometimes. That's why right now we're experimenting with online workshops where folks can just go as an individual and join the workshops. But if we're going into a business setting or an organizational setting, usually it's someone I know thinking, we need Debbie. But sometimes it's usually the person we're working with at the end is in human resources, maybe L&D, although most of my clients are small. And if a company has L&D, they don't typically hire outside consultants. They have a whole organization doing it. So I'm usually in the end working with human resources or sometimes someone in the COO's organization.
That would make sense. How do you, so that's very much word of mouth, right? Because people know you. I think that's a challenge that actually a lot of consultants are facing. Like the person they're actually helping are not decision makers. So how do you get into those rooms? Let me rephrase. How do you make sure that as a young professional, you feel the pain, right? You see the point of getting trained on leadership and management and stakeholder management. As the manager of those young professionals, maybe a bit less, right? So it's not at the very top of your priority list, one can imagine. So how do you do the right mix of problem awareness, solution awareness in front of the decision makers, but also the person that you're actually going to help? How does that all work on your side?
That is our number one challenge. And I keep saying us because I do have a partner, Jenny Warla, in many of the workshops that we do. That's the biggest challenge. And we feel like we should be speaking to the decision makers. I don't think the young professionals are, as you said, thinking, oh gosh, I think I've got to go get project management. Sometimes that happens, but that's not worth bringing someone in to do an engagement with 10 to 15, 20 people. It's usually the decision maker is someone who's in management or on the executive staff. And as I said, again, I work with smaller companies, so I say executive staff. So we publish newsletters. We try to feed the machine on LinkedIn. I'll be honest, my peers are starting to retire, so that's making it even more challenging for me personally. But I think that what I see out there is you have to be a resource and an expert to those decision makers and appeal to the problems that they may be experiencing and find a way to speak to that so that when they do run into a situation, they think, that's right. Maybe Debbie and Jenny can help me out with this.
The approach. So it's about getting the right message to the decision makers who is in any case going to be the one, pushing the button, and the one who is problem aware as well. So that's a very interesting configuration to be in, because the person that you end up helping is not the person that you've done all your marketing for, quote unquote. So
That's right.
that's very interesting.
It is.
So what's and challenging, I suspect, right? Because it's there is always this like mixed messages and who's the right avatar, who's the right decision makers. That's very interesting. So speaking of which, what has worked for you in order to achieve that? So you mentioned newsletter, LinkedIn, referrals. Like what is the marketing mix that Debbie uses to
Yeah.
get the message in front of the right people and get the decision makers to raise their hands and be like, yeah, I might need Debbie.
I'm be honest, the main thing is just, nurturing your network and being out there and being on people's minds so that they'll think of you. I think of an example, this is quite a few years ago, but just to give you a specific example, there was a startup, it was called Picketeers, and it happened to be led by a person who I worked with at Intuit and a person who I worked with at a now defunct startup called Webvan. And it actually was the person from Webvan who said, I think I know someone who could help us out. And he said, her name is Debbie Crouse. And the other person, Dan Levin, said, I know Debbie Crouse, right? So it's just like
Oh,
keeping in touch with your network. And also when you are in jobs, whether as a consultant or when you're an employee, because I pop back and forth, that you're doing a good job yourself and you are that person that they think of. For me, if someone needs somebody who can quote get shit done, I hope this is okay, I come to
all
mind.
right. It's a Peggy 18 show. You can go.
But that's just kind of nurturing your reputation and nurturing your network. I find that most of my client engagements and the ones that have been ongoing come from people who I know and I've worked with in the past.
So I like that. That does make a lot of sense. I think this is consulting 101. You start with your network. For me personally, and maybe I'm a bit biased here, and I say this to everybody, it's not an acquisition channel in the sense of like that's the byproduct of doing good work. Now, if you're nurturing it like purposefully, deliberately, making sure that you have touch points, content that you feed this network as well with certain information, so you stay top of mind, like you just mentioned, this is the way to go. And this is how you can actually build a referral network, which turns into actual business of warm leads, which is what you want as a B2B coach or
Absolutely.
consultant.
In fact, I subscribe to a newsletter about newsletters. And that's his philosophy is, the value of a newsletter, for example, is that you are putting yourself in front of those decision makers. And one of the things that Jenny and I have struggled with is like, what is the content of our newsletter? And where we landed after a while is it is for the decision makers, and that therefore you're building your newsletter audience out of the decision makers, which is a little bit difficult when the decision makers are all executives and very busy. But
A
we've
lot of
decided
noise.
that you have to know who you're really put a lot of thought into. Who's your target? Just kind of marketing 101 too.
So being crystal clear on your ICP is key. And I like this. I like what you just mentioned here, Debbie. Like it all starts with this because I talk to so many B2B coaches and consultants and they will try everything, right? Rightfully so. Like they want to grow, they are testing, they are iterating. But like when we look at the messaging, we're like, who is this for? Oh, I have like some clients. Sometimes it's gonna be, the CEO. For if it's a big company, if it's a small company, it's gonna be the CEO. If it's a very large enterprise, it's gonna be head of HR. I'm like, right, but then the problematic is that a CEO of a mid-sized company faces has nothing to do with the challenges that the CEO of a small company faces, which has nothing to do. You get the picture. So
Yes.
I like that about you and what you do. Crystal clear on the ICP, crystal clear on the decision maker, so that you can target your message properly, position accordingly, and get business out of it, which seems to be working.
That's right.
Tell me a bit more about how you go from that initial awareness, right? This network. You get an introduction, people mention your name. How do you move from initial conversation to SOW, letter of engagement? We rock and roll, and we're gonna help those young people.
Yeah, we have a process, being a process person in my heart, and that is that we have that initial conversation where someone says they're interested in something, we get an email, whatever, and we set up a typical exploratory conversation. And in those exploratory conversations, we ideally want the decision maker in that conversation, not someone who's been delegated to. I find that makes it more difficult. But if not, we do our best. And that conversation is geared towards both what their needs are, what they're looking for, why they're looking to hire us, but also it's looking towards what's the bigger picture of the business need. So we're really adamant about knowing what's the broader context of why you've brought us in. And we have been burned by not understanding the broader context. Like we did training for a small client, and the audience was all experienced managers, and the HR person who brought us in told us that they were beginning they didn't know anything about project management, blah, blah, blah. All of our material was geared towards the young professionals. And we got literally in the room, and they were all like, well, this is boring. We know all this. So we pretty much failed and learned from that, like really understanding what the bigger picture is, who the audience is, and what the pain points are that not just the person hiring us is trying to solve, but that the organization is feeling as a whole. We then follow that up with, we call it just a draft proposal. We call it a proposal. It's not an SOW yet. And we say, this is what we heard. This is what we think we can do to help you. Maybe we start talking about pricing there, but a lot of times not. And we just get verification of what we heard and what they want. And then that leads into a proposed statement of work with pricing, and somewhere along the line getting their budget, right? Like finding out what is your budget for this. And we will scale up and scale down the proposed statement of work based on their budget and our value.
Interesting. You explore the budget much later in the process than I'm used to. Is that on purpose? Like, are you doing this because you want to make sure that you're going to deliver value no matter what with this like initial engagement, and then start talking about the budget afterwards? Or like, what's the thought process behind it?
That's a good question. Maybe we're doing it wrong, but
No, I don't think so. Actually, I think it's interesting. I mean, it depends on the conversion rate then, but go ahead.
We want to definitely make sure that we understand the problem that we're solving, and we definitely don't pitch a proposal till we know their budget, though. Just to be clear, but we say, this is it, and we might even say to them, and based on our standard rates, this is what it would cost. Is this in your budget? I find sometimes it's difficult to get the answer as to what is your budget, right? I don't know if you do,
course.
but
Of course it is. Always. That's the crux, isn't it?
Yeah. And sometimes we do this whole thing and they go, oh no. And so then we say, fine. Well, now you have a 10-point possibility and we're going to give you 2 because that's your budget. No. But now we know what they're really looking to solve. And so when we scale it down, we're trying to still make them feel like we're adding value.
And that does absolutely make sense. I like the process. I don't think you're doing it wrong at all, DP. It's always going to be a matter of, so from my experience, right, it starts with, and for the people listening to us right now, it all starts with pricing is always a value question. Well, if they don't have the budget, they just don't have the budget. But at the end of the day, many people end up finding more budget if the thing is really solving a pain point that is extremely painful at the moment. So it's always a matter of like positioning the value right. And then it's always going to be a game of like give and take, like pull and push. It's like, oh, okay, look, this is not within budget. Cool. Do you think this could help? Right. Let's figure out a way to make it work. So I don't recommend making discounts or giving discounts, at least not from the get-go, but more like, look, this is the list of items that we agreed on, and that's what's included. What do you think is the least important? And we can remove those, and we adjust the budget accordingly, which is what you do, which I think is the right way to approach it.
Absolutely.
Once you get that initial engagement, how do you retain? The reason I'm asking this is, from my experience as a consultant, and that's something that the partner taught me at the time, there are 2 types of consultants: the hunters and the farmers. And the partner who told me this was like, Guillaume, I'm a hunter. I love the smell of fresh blood in the morning. I love to go after new business. That's my jam. And it was like, but the partners bringing in the most money, the ones like growing the fastest, are the ones who are able to take that initial engagement, over deliver, and transform it into a multi-layered, multi-year projects, feeding other teams from PwC. Like, those are the ones making the most money. So farming is actually where the money is in consulting. When you come in, you train a team of young professionals, it's done. They are trained. So how do you upsell? Do you train other young people within the team? Do you go up the ladder? How do you typically do that, Debbie?
I think in our most successful engagements, we have broadened the scope. So we come in to do one topic, and as we're going through the discovery process, we're also, I miss this, educating them about us and our skills and our background. And Jenny and I happen to really complement each other because I'm more of a business consultant and she comes from engineering and she's more from the engineering side, but she also is a personal coach. So we actually do have a somewhat broader array of skills between us, and you have to, number one, make that known that you're not just in that niche that they may have hired you for and maybe that you focused on to begin with. But secondly, the most successful clients we've had have brought us back, honestly, because they like us and because they decide to turn it into a program. And that's the key to the farmers, is helping the client see maybe the need that this can become programmatic. So we just taught you about, a lot of times we don't even start with project management, let's say meeting leadership. But now, while we were doing that, we saw that you really have a need for working on communication. Maybe we should do a communication workshop. Again, my clients don't have L&D departments necessarily. So we become their outsourced L&D.
How is that? The reason I'm asking is, in B2B coaching and consulting, you want to keep your focus. You provide so much value to a client that they ask you to do more, which is money, right? So you don't refuse when people propose to give you money. But at the same time, that's a complete different offering. So how do you navigate that?
You have to learn to say no when it's not in your wheelhouse. And I have learned that, again, from experience, that in fact, I had a prior client contact me this past year, and she wanted us to do something that was so far out of our wheelhouse. And as much as I wanted to work for her, I had to say no. So you give better value that way, because otherwise, if you deliver on something that you don't have the experience or the expertise, say you're not doing training, which is what I do, but say you're consulting in another area, you're a subject matter expert. That's typically why people are bringing you in as a consultant. So you can maybe spread your wings a little bit outside of your wheelhouse and your core competencies, but if you go too far, there's a risk you're going to fail. And you don't want to do that, and you have to learn to say no.
And to that. What's the next thing for you, Debbie? Like, when you look at your business right now, what's the kind of the challenge that you're facing right now that you know that if you solve, you're going to take the business to the next level? What are you looking forward to work on?
If someone could help me with that, taking the business to the next level. The biggest
Said every
challenge
entrepreneur ever.
Yes. My biggest challenge is that the world has moved online, and what I am really good at is the live interaction. And whether it's in person or online, that doesn't matter. It's the live interaction that I think that I'm personally good at. And the world has moved online. The next generations have moved online. We are experimenting with doing online workshops, just putting them as self-serve, and it's okay. We're not very good at producing them, to be honest. It takes us a long time. So I think that's the biggest challenge right now, is like, as the world now is shifting off of remote work and back to in-person, how do we plug back into in-person, since we kind of stepped back from it for a while, which is true for a lot of businesses and in general. Like, how do we adjust to in-person happening now? And of course, The second thing is AI, of course, because in my world, uh, I think we need to master AI to generate the content, but yet still keep it as our content, if you know what I mean.
I know what you mean, and that's the whole challenge, isn't it? How do you? So, I think that the value in this podcast is also so that's the challenge. Thanks a lot for opening up about this. That's super interesting. How are you going to go about solving it? Like, what are you thinking of? The reason I'm asking this, Debbie, is we will have people listening to us right now who will be stuck at the same point. I think it's
Yeah.
always interesting to hear from your peers how they think about solving a problem that they are facing themselves. So everything is moving online, everything is moving remote. People, well, there is a forced to go back to the office trend at the moment, but it's still widely more remote than it was before COVID. There is AI on top of this. How do you become a leader? Do young people want to become leaders even? Like there is so many moving pieces. How do you go about solving that specific problem and challenge?
Yeah, I've been thinking about this a lot, and we have to adapt.
Yeah.
We have to adapt, and I'm excited about the idea in the project management space of starting to work with people on how do you use AI to become a really good project manager. And I've put my toes in it with an online workshop that we're just finishing up. But I think that you just have to adapt, and you have to figure out, how to produce with AI. You have to figure out how to integrate AI into talking about stakeholders, which actually AI is awesome for working on stakeholder management, for example, because you just go ask your little bot, here's what I have, what I miss, and you find things that you missed. But still showing folks where there's still a personal leadership aspect to working in a professional atmosphere. You still have to be good at interacting with people. That is not going to go away. And so you think about where your niche fits as the world is changing, and I'm in the middle of this, like munging it together.
Amen to that. Debbie, I think this was an amazing episode. We got to discuss how do you find the right stakeholders? How do you find the right decision makers, even though the people benefiting from your services are completely different? How do you communicate to them? Actually, and not a lot of people are doing this, not enough people are doing this, actually nurturing your network and actively engaging, finding ways to keep them engaged so that they send you business. And I think the challenge that you mentioned is something that actually every B2B coach and consultant is facing right now. So thanks a lot. If people want to find out more about you, see what you do, where should they go?
Well, you can go to LinkedIn is the easiest way. You can find me, Debbie Crouse, or you can go to our website, cwtrainingandconsulting.com, and check out some of what we do.
So we'll put all the links in the description to make it easier for people to find it. And I can say one thing is that you at least got one new connection on LinkedIn out of this episode. Me, I just added you. Debbie, thank you so much for coming on Consulting Leaders.
Nice to meet you, Guillaume.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of the Consulting Leaders podcast. We hope you learned valuable lessons on how to grow your practice and take your business to the next level. Make sure to subscribe and leave us a review wherever you're listening to this show so you never miss an episode. To apply and be a guest on the show, click the link in the description. See you next time.